Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Digital Creative. I'm your host, Winston Chaniwa. Today, we've got a very special guest, a good friend of mine. We've known each other for many years. We've tried to do this before through an episode called Creatv, but this time around, I thought we'd have a nice, deeper conversation. I had a chance to be staying with him for a while. Mr. Carl Joshua Ncube. Welcome to the show.
Yes, I feel like I should have had a podcasting voice, right? Because it's the podcasting voice that sounds like, remember Radio 1?
Exactly.
Back in the day, yeah.
Yeah, no, cool. Look, as with all my episodes, I usually like to start with a brief history of who you are, going way back, where you were born, how many siblings, that kind of thing. Just a brief background of who you are.
Yeah, so I'm born in 1979, right, to two teachers. My father is Ndebele Charles Ncube, woodwork, technical graphics teacher, and metalwork,
right,
which is important. Then my mother is a home economics teacher, at the time. So they both were teaching at Njube.
Okay.
And then apparently, my mom gets pregnant. There are two teachers at the same school, right? So I think they went to two different schools.
Okay.
After that. So I'm born in Bulawayo at the time. And then my brother came after, Cedric.
Yeah.
And so my parents split at that particular point. And so what ensued was me jumping from school to school.
Okay.
Between my parents living in Bulawayo, sometimes in Harare, then Mutare, Marondera, which is in Wadlove, and then Mutare as well.
Okay.
So somewhere within the schooling system, because of all of that confusion, I skip a grade by mistake.
Right.
End up in grade 6 instead of grade 5. Mm-hmm. So I saved my parents a year's school fees. They're not grateful, those people. They kept expecting results. And my love for art have always been like a creative fine artist in the beginning, because
right,
my father had really fostered that, being a technical graphics teacher. So he really was hoping for an architect's son. So drawing with straight lines and so on, I preferred curves and, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So eventually in Form 1, I get introduced to the printing club.
Right.
And, doing the print manually, copy pasting in real life.
Yeah.
And then I encountered my first computer.
Okay.
And programming just took over. I just became very excited in terms of merging what I had artistically in my head and the structure and logic of programming.
Right.
And so that was my new love.
Okay.
My parents consequently had other kids after that. My dad had 3. My mother had 2. My mom married my stepfather, who also had his own kids. So we're now a whole troop of people.
Right.
In fact, I haven't even counted, but we're a lot of people.
Okay.
So have a lot of siblings. Creativity really took over, but also because of lack of identity, being half Shona, half Ndebele, I couldn't fit in anyway.
Okay.
So trying to create an identity was very important for me.
Right.
To create a safe space for me to be creative without being judged. So I became a person who was able to define my own spaces very early.
Okay.
And wanted to start a company. We did start a company when we were about 16, and consequently our parents sent us to England because I think they felt we needed to go into the normal job market, right? And so I went to study nursing. So I'm a nursing dropout.
Okay.
Eventually came back home. Got back into graphic design, became very popular in that regard, and started my own ad agency, and then went into animation. And here I am today, /stand-up comedian, /chef, but I've now gotten into the confidence of knowing that, I have different tools that I use to express myself. And so whatever tool I have at my disposal that I can use, like comedy, my father was a part-time comedian. So, taken from my genetic pool, that's who I've become today.
It's always amazing because you are so multifaceted in terms of the work that you do, your creativity, how you're able to pivot from one sector to another. You mentioned how you were able to start a business early on in your childhood. Where did that confidence come from? What gave you that drive to say, I can do this?
Yeah, no, so we come from a generation that was very fortunate. A lot in the world was changing,
right?
And a lot of structures were being broken apart. Old systems were dying, new things were coming up, lots of innovations. The computer itself,
right?
Seeing people like Bill Gates at 18.
Yeah.
We lived through seeing that.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't an abnormal thing for me to think that you could start a company.
Yeah.
So my stepdad was the first person I knew who started a company in Zimbabwe, and that really kind of kick-started it.
Right.
So my stepdad started a security company called Chitcam Security, and I'd never heard of a black person starting a security company.
Okay.
And so I started to change the subjects I was doing at school, you know, getting into business management, accounting, and computer science, like really dropping the arts and really focusing and honing my, wanting my core skills.
Yeah.
To add, I knew I could draw, so I knew the creativity was there,
Right.
but I didn't have this other skill, which was entrepreneurship. And so I took the subjects at A level that would be able to foster that, and then used starting a company as a case study.
Right.
And so I didn't know really what I was enriching myself with was skills that I would eventually use later on to disrupt, and knowing how disruption felt, because I was always fighting my mother in terms of disrupting. And so I took those lessons, because when I was now in the market, the resistance in the market to the stuff I was doing just was very similar to my mother. So I started looking at that as training rather than as a bad thing.
Okay. You mentioned like you then started like an ad agency.
Yeah.
It was Tattoo.
Yes.
I believe it was called.
Yeah. So before Tattoo,
Okay.
there was Hypnotic.
Okay.
So what happened was, when I came back home, I actually wanted to start a cartoon, as in a column, like a cartoon column in the Herald.
Right.
And so I had come up with a cartoon called Budi Blazo Brother Exebra,
Okay.
which looked at the conflict of being Shona Ndebele colored, or white.
Okay.
But these are 4 Zimbabwean boys who come from this, and they all go to the same school, but the conflicts that they have. And so when I was talking about doing cartoons, people used to describe cartoons as being animations.
Right.
Now, I wasn't an animator.
Okay.
And so a friend of mine referred me to a guy who was looking for an animator. And so he says, let's look at your drawings.
Right.
He saw the drawings, was very impressed, but he thought I could animate them simply because I had drawn them.
Right.
And so I worked for this guy called Alex Gore as a graphic designer animator.
Okay.
And I had to learn on the spot how to use 3D and so on.
Right.
Long and short of it, I then learned TV production and so on. And then I left his company. Then I started my own company in my mom's house, in my bedroom, called Hypnotic.
Okay.
And so Hypnotic I started servicing all the advertising agencies in Zimbabwe. I was the one doing the end screen logo animations. Now, at that time, nobody was doing that.
Okay.
And so I just became the guy, the guy who was working out of his bedroom. Remember that Bill Gates story? Like, so I really thought that's how you start. That's how I really thought companies were started.
Okay.
And so these guys came and approached me, called Savannah Media Center, and decided to buy me out or buy me into the company, make me creative head and give me some equity in the company.
Right.
So I was pretty young at the time, and didn't even understand the structure of getting equity in a company. And so I became a shareholder in this company.
Yeah.
And eventually I left that company.
Yeah.
And then joined up with who was my business partner at the time, Ngobile Magwizi, to start a company called Tattoo, which was the ad agency that a lot of people know us for.
Okay.
So it was myself, Ngobile Magwizi, and Chido Madziwanyika.
All right.
Ngobile focused on the business development side. I was the creative head in terms of television and print.
Yeah.
And then Chido Madziwanyika was really the guy we needed, because web was becoming the new thing.
Okay.
And we didn't understand the space.
Right.
And so Chido was very, very good at that. He had already gotten into interactive CDs and so on. Yes. So we were really groundbreaking in that regard, because we were known as TV, print, and web, and no company in the entire country could handle a TV campaign, a print campaign, and a web campaign.
Yeah, it seems like you've always been like on the forefront of leading technologies or a leading trend that's about to pop off.
Yeah.
How do you recognize these things, and how, or what gives you the confidence? Because no, this thing is going to pop, and I'm going to delve into it, learn it, and then implement it.
Yeah. So, firstly, I'm very spiritual, right? So I feel a connection with God, because God is my ultimate creative. And because I've been studying God from a creative perspective, God in turn has always communicated to me as a result.
Right.
So, when you look for something, when you're digging for clues, when you're digging for something, then that thing starts unearthing itself. And God has unearthed a lot of secrets to me. And so how to pay attention.
Right.
So sometimes creatives, and we do it a lot, you're designing something and you can't get outside your own head.
Right.
Well, once you've decided on a concept, and sometimes it's like that with markets, where you get comfortable becoming the best at something,
Right.
that you don't want to become anything else.
Outside of that.
Yeah, so being vulnerable enough to say, listen, I am going to go on a new learning curve.
Right.
And so when you learn a new thing, it's not that I would have noticed that it's a trend.
Yeah.
I just get fascinated by a new thing.
Okay.
And then I go and I learn it. But again, as creatives, we have always been like that.
Yeah.
So you're using a camera, a new camera comes out. You're using software, new software comes out.
Right.
And so sometimes designers will say, listen, I'm just going to stick to Adobe
Okay.
and not really explore
Other options.
Corel Draw or whatever. And I used to see designers argue. There was a time when it was like Macromedia,
Yes.
and they had I think it was what was it? It was like a vector based. It was like the Illustrator version at the time.
What was it called?
Freehand.
Freehand. Exactly,
So freehand was the thing at the time, and then there were the Photoshop guys, and then there were the Corel Draw guys,
Right.
and they would be arguing, and yet I would say, you know what? It's kind of like the Messi Ronaldo debate.
Yeah.
Why not watch both?
Exactly.
And so I always kept my toes in
everything. Yeah.
And that kind of allowed me to pivot, but it's kind of I think it's a cop-out because I was never the best. I could never be the best.
Okay.
And so starting in a new industry, I could feel some semblance of being the best before the real experts caught up. And so by the time the real experts catch up, the specialists, and they become better than me,
Right.
I've already creamed the market. I'm tired in the market, and then I can exit and go to another place.
So do you think that the saying "jack of all trades, master of none" applies?
Yeah, well, I think in a way it's an unfair thing to say master of none,
Okay.
because I am a master of something,
Right.
and I'm a master of trends.
Right.
So I look at myself as a computer. I'm the hardware.
Yeah.
So you can put any software into me, the computer doesn't have to change.
Right.
So I always understand that I always upgrade my operating system. My operating system is the thing. So while people in the market are the ones that seek to define me, I've defined myself by a completely different set of metrics.
Yeah.
So for me, I really am an expert at prophecy, trends, knowing where to go.
Right.
Whereas a lot of people, maybe they focus on a specific thing. They'll say, oh, I'm an expert at AI.
Exactly.
Whereas I'm not an expert at AI.
Yeah.
I'm an expert at knowing how to use AI in my operating system.
Right.
So I'm not a jack of all trades, actually. I'm actually a master of that one thing.
Right.
So it's just like cakes and ovens, right?
Yeah.
You're either a cake or an oven. And what I mean is, like, if you're a cake, you are defined by one thing, one recipe.
Yeah.
But I'm an oven. I can make cakes.
Right.
But I'm not defined by
By the
cakes.
cakes.
I can make many other things.
Yeah.
So you can't look at a stove and say, why are you making a roast beef today? Because there's the stove by design. That's why I love God, because God by design has made us all the same. 2 eyes, brain, whatever it is that we have.
Yeah.
But somehow, some of us are doctors.
Right.
And some of us learn to become creative. Some become engineers.
Yeah.
What is that? It's the same thing that computers are founded on. Is that if the hardware is legit and it's got the right operating system, you can jack in any software, and that thing will begin to perform in ways that you never conceived. Yeah.
Okay. So going back throughout your journey, I was very fascinated when you decided to do the whole bus thing, staying in the bus, converting it in. What was the whole thought process behind it, and what was the vision?
Yeah. So initially, when you're an artist, and I was a comedian at the time,
right?
You keep renting better,
right?
You keep getting better at renting,
right?
And so my job as a creative has never been to design nice things. It's to come up with solutions for my clients.
Right.
So if a client is saying want to penetrate a market, we use design but other things as well in order to solve the problem.
Right.
So I started solving problems for myself instead.
Yeah.
I started looking at myself and problems and saying, why don't you own a house? And then I started looking at what does house mean? What does property mean?
Right.
There's a difference between the land that's situated and the building. Like if you go to Uganda, the person who owns the building is different to the one who owns the land. And so I started looking at these disruptive methods of looking at property.
Right.
And in some countries, they live in tents. The rich people live in tents.
Right.
And so we started looking at, okay, so what if we lived in a tent? Could I still work? Could I still design? Could I still do the things that I could do?
Okay.
And so I went and lived in a tent. But as a solution, how was I going to make money from the tents?
Right.
So we started a tourism company. So we had to learn how to use our hardware, our operating system, to operate by creating meaningful products that could make money so that it could justify why we were living in tents, why we could have this long holiday.
Right.
And so when we saw that, okay, tents are not really that structured, perhaps we needed a more flexible way of moving around the country.
Okay.
So initially we wanted a bus.
Okay.
But because I have a big problem, I don't like driving,
Right.
and I don't know how to drive.
Okay.
So my thought was, I could, first it was thinking about the bus, but I was like, who was going to drive it?
Right.
And then I was like, but I like the idea of now I like the idea of the bus. But now I didn't want to drive it. So I thought it's cheaper for me to get a shell.
Okay.
What if I got a shell and then just parked it in a village somewhere?
And
then
just
every time when I needed to move it, I make enough money so that I can get a towing company
to just lift
it. To lift it and take it where I need to go. So that was our solution.
Okay.
And so we built up this bus, but we thought, do you know what? I'm a digital storyteller. Why don't I tell the story of what we're doing?
Yeah.
We started attracting sponsorships. We
Right.
started attracting people who wanted to see the bus. We started to attract people who wanted to build buses.
Yeah.
But most importantly, we started noticing a lot of rich people actually converted buses into homes.
Okay.
And they were traveling to Vic Falls. Millionaires, high net worth people.
Yeah.
And so our behavior became, okay, so what is it that's different between these people and people who are starting out?
Yeah.
It was very simple. A lot of these white people said, the challenge that you guys have as Africans, for example, if you have a rich father, your rich father doesn't show you how he started off.
Yeah.
He doesn't help you to start out, and then he doesn't give you ownership. And I said, what does that mean? He says, when our kids are growing up, the first thing we give them is a tent. They own something. They own a property.
Okay.
The backyard. They go and do camping. It's not a game. It's it's an actual philosophy. The kid learns how to look after things, how to pack his tent, how to keep it in a particular place. All of those things are lessons that are important.
That he's going to learn later in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas sometimes in our African construct, we had that, remember, because when you turned 13, your father would show you how to build a house.
Okay.
Yeah, how to build a crawl.
Right.
And so every time when you did something good, your mother rewarded you by giving you a goat or a cow from her crawl.
Yeah.
So that kind of exchange, we took it away and we started pursuing, and it's also integral and a problem within our independence as well.
Right.
That the independence we sought from our colonizers was so that we could live like them. Not independence so we could live like us.
Like us, the way we used
Yes,
to do.
in my mind, I thought that's what the independence meant.
Okay.
Is we wanted to be independent to go back to a borderless Africa,
exactly.
to a rural Africa. Whereas instead, no, we wanted independence so we could have a Western education,
Okay.
Western accents, live in Western housing, do Western things. So the bus thing was addressing a lot of different things I was struggling with.
Okay.
Because I wasn't allowed to have an identity of either being Shona or Ndebele. So I identified with being Zimbabwe. And seeking that is when I realized a lot of holes in what we call Zimbabwe.
Right.
I started thinking, we've got it all wrong.
Okay.
We have to have a different way of looking at it.
Things.
And so that became a mission to not only harness my ancestral DNA to say, my dad was a metalwork teacher, a bus is metal,
right,
and my dad is woodwork teacher and technical graphics teacher, so I could design, I could do the woodwork, I could work with the metal,
right,
and those were the things that I was using to celebrate my late father as well.
And it seems like you are quite deliberate in learning these tools, in learning these skills, to then be able to apply them in whatever it is project that you're working on. Looking at Carl as a chef, you started cooking. What was that about?
So this is the beautiful thing about, and when I teach a lot of business to a lot of young entrepreneurs getting into the space, the biggest challenge that entrepreneurs have is wanting to solve a problem for the market.
Right.
So you perceive that people want eggs, and so you get into chicken farming because you want to fulfill the market. You're looking at someone supplying eggs. Whereas my approach is a little bit different.
Right.
My approach is, what are my problems? So one of my biggest problems was hunger. There were months where I didn't have money and we'd go hungry.
Right.
And so I was like, I know how to cook, but how do I leverage that as a business so that we never starve?
You always have food.
Yeah, we always have food.
Yeah.
And the easiest thing was build yourself up as the best chef in the country so that you never struggle to get groceries.
Okay.
The supermarkets will give you groceries. The money will be the added on thing. Like I once lived, I realized when you chase value, you make money in the process.
Right.
But if you chase money, you don't necessarily get value.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is there was a year 2015. I deliberately looked at all the things I pay for,
Right.
the things I want to earn money for. And so I took money out of the equation because money is a middleman. So a middleman, money is like an adapter.
Okay.
Where I want you to look at money like round plugs is the access to money.
Right.
And you are the device with a square plug.
Right.
Money is the adapter that allows you to connect to the grid. Now, if you could figure out a direct link to the grid,
Right.
you will get unlimited power without the need of the adapter. And so what that does is that if you approach a supermarket and you say to them, I will do all of your graphic design
Right.
and social media stuff in exchange for X amount of groceries per month.
Right.
They will give you more value than if they gave you cash and then you still had to come back to buy the groceries.
Right.
And so people easily would put me on a year contract of groceries, internet, DSTV.
Because they think it's cheaper.
Yeah, because they don't have to expend and get money out because people hold on to stocks.
Exactly.
We saw hotel rooms do the same thing.
Right.
We saw airlines do the same thing.
Right.
So the airlines would say, listen, as long as we've got space in the plane, we will give you
A seat.
a seat.
Yeah.
But if we don't have space in the plane, I had a bus company on standby
Okay.
who would give me tickets.
Okay.
So I was always covered.
All right.
And so I started to get a lot of value from solving my own problems first. And when I solved my own problems, I then realized problems that I could solve for money. So while I'm doing the barter trade with the supermarket will still struggle and say, we still need services to pay for.
Right.
And so I'm already in.
Okay.
And so they will give me money since I'm already working within
cover that.
the system.
Okay.
So the leverage of my business has always been solve our problems first.
Right.
My wife and I don't want to struggle for food.
Yeah.
We don't want to struggle for travel.
Yeah.
And we certainly want to always be happy, in a happy place.
Right.
And so the barter system, I focus on barter. All my relationships are based on barter.
Barter trade.
My wife focuses on all the money parts of the business.
Okay.
What it allows us to do is we're solving the same problem but differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, sounds good. So I like your out of the box thinking,
Right.
and maybe looking at the industry, the creative industry. Why is it so difficult, especially for us Zimbabweans, to be able to have that line of thinking or that creative thinking outside of the box? Because it seems like everything that we want to do is attached to some monetary value, of which sometimes that may not be the best option.
Yeah.
How best as Zimbabweans can we leverage that barter or get into that mindset of thinking outside the box to come up with innovative solutions?
Yeah, so it's a very spiritual thing, eh?
Yeah.
It's an extremely spiritual thing that God gives us unlimited capabilities.
Right.
And then the devil packages it in a restrictive manner. So in your mind, you're thinking, God says to Adam and Eve, hey, let's just work together in this garden.
Okay.
You're like me. You can have full reign of this environment I've created.
Right.
Then the devil creates a construct.
Okay.
And he says, yes, but if you eat this fruit,
Become like him.
you can become like him.
Right.
And so it starts framing a thing. And so when you look at it in history, where there's God there, but man asks for a king to rule over him.
Right.
The man asks for a structure because they don't want to communicate directly with God.
With God.
And so it's the same thing. There's God, then man creates religion to create these bounds. So we feel safer when we take faith out of the equation.
Okay.
Because faith gives us an uncertainty. So thinking outside the box requires a large amount of faith.
Right.
Whereas going with the status quo requires a large amount of knowledge.
Okay.
And knowledge sometimes gives us a safety. And we strive for wanting safety.
Right.
But we don't realize how much faith gives us safety as a result.
Okay.
And so thinking outside the box is really a no-brainer. It's a silent voice that's always talking to you. It's always telling you to look to the left instead of looking to the right where you've been looking the whole time. It says look back, look forward, look up, look down.
Right.
But you don't want to follow that.
Okay.
So we do that inner voice that, because remember, the left brain and right brain is always fighting.
Yeah.
So right hand side of the brain thinks everything is possible, which is why when you go to bed you dream, because your brain has been stifled all day with the left side, which is logical,
Right.
which says, you know what, if you collaborate, someone is going to hurt your feelings. They're going to steal from you.
Right.
Or if you must work between 8 and 5.
Right.
Because you shouldn't mix work and home. Don't work with your partner. Don't work with your wife. Don't work with your family because they'll steal from you.
Yeah.
All of that is where outside the box exists.
Okay.
Like I say, opportunities do not come between 8 to 5. If it did, then sure. But opportunities actually drop on a Saturday afternoon
Right.
or 3 a.m.
When you just wapepuka pakati
Right.
pausiku.
So look at how many times you're stopping yourself from thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
When you're sleeping and an idea comes, you wake up.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just go to the toilet and you go back to bed and you say, listen, I'll deal with it in the morning. But your brain is telling you to do something now.
Now. And when you wake up, it's gone.
It's gone. So it's no longer there.
Yeah.
Or you think, oh, I want to work with my wife, but because you had an argument, I shouldn't work with my wife because it would be detrimental to your relationship.
Okay.
But you fight with your wife anyway.
Anyway, yeah.
You fight with your boss anyway. You fight with your colleagues anyway. So
Yeah.
these constructs we give ourselves, these myths,
Right.
of saying to ourselves, even how we look at the world, we look at the world at the world map.
Yeah.
If I was to ask you, right, where is Zimbabwe? Is it at the top or the bottom of the map? You'll say it's at the bottom of the map. But I'll say, in space, what's bottom?
True.
Yeah, because if we look at the world the other way around,
Yeah.
Zimbabwe is at the top.
It's at the top.
So going to Europe is down there. That is a very psychological change in thinking.
Right.
To look at the world from that perspective.
Different perspective.
Changes how you look at things.
Yeah.
Because even as a comedian, I just used to travel around the world wanting to be like Chris Rock.
Right.
I wanted to be like Kevin Hart.
Right.
Then I realized that, no, they've never been to Africa. So I can be the custodian
of this.
of everything African, the expert of everything African. I do not need to seek to be American. And that's where the out of the box comes in.
Okay.
Of being shut out of constructs
Right.
and then having to create your own.
Your own constructs.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that sounds good. So now, with you've recently launched a new entity, Rural BNB.
Yeah.
Just basically putting the tourism concept on its head. The Airbnbs that we know in here in town, but taking that to the rural areas. How did that come about, and what are you doing with that?
Yeah, so Rural BNB started with solving the simple problem where, my grandmother was Zulu, my grandfather was Sutu, my father was born Ndebele, because Ndebele was a construct created again in our country
Right.
by white people to say everyone who's Shangani and the Zulu Xhosa, you are all Ndebele. So you normalized everybody. Then everybody who's Zulu Karanga, what becomes Shona.
Right.
So now I am born into parents who are Ndebele and Shona, which don't even exist anyway.
Okay.
Then I come out as this kid who is not allowed to celebrate each. So when I'm in Bulawayo, they don't regard me as,
Ndebele.
And then at the top of it, these grandparents had come from South Africa and didn't have a rural homestead. So whenever the Kumusha thing came up at school, I didn't have one. When everyone was like, I'm being punished by my parents and being sent to Kumusha, I craved it.
Because you don't have one.
I didn't have one. And so in my 40s, when I was now saying, listen, I now have nephews and nieces, how do we start out our own Kumusha?
Okay.
That pursuit of telling people my story, thinking it was embarrassing, but I wanted to share with them that I'm Nakumusha.
Right.
I realized almost everybody had the same problem. And in seeing everyone having the same problem, I realized then that I could create a solution. Something very organic, something very elegant that could be translated across all African countries.
Okay.
Which was convert your rural homestead into a tourist facility. Not for everyone, but for yourself.
Okay.
A place that you can retreat to. And you don't have to go somewhere else on holiday.
Right.
That could be your holiday home. This could be the African dream, is to build something amazing. And so the design process of saying, but what does that look like?
All right.
as you're solving problems, what does rural look like? So now we had to look at the architectural language behind it, the food language. Now all of these gifts that we had picked up all the while, we're now piecing these things together. We're now like Steve Jobs, where you're saying, to create the ultimate phone, what are the technologies required to create the iPhone? So we looked at the rural hut like an iPhone. It needed a chikafu, which is my cooking initiative. It needed a CJN Academy, which was my training initiative. It needed my Kick-Ass, which is my design and advertising. It needed my Garnish company, which was my hotel and restaurant consultancy. Once you join these things together,
it makes a whole.
It now has an iPhone looking thing, which is a rural BNB. And rural BNB is made up of 101 different components. That define this particular entity or program. It's not just building a hut. It's language systems. It's AI. It's using technology, language systems, and it's creativity. It's design. It's a lot of different things. And that begins to describe for me what Africans are. Africans were never defined by one thing. We are spiritual creatures who are connected to our ancestors. We are nomads. We are hunters. We are hunter-gatherers. We are a lot of things until white people came and made us farmers, miners. So it's going back. Everything is now solving the problem, which is why I said that God issue. God is now teaching me and saying, you as a people have gotten it wrong this whole time.
So I think continuing with our conversation, we've just talked about rural BNB and all the dynamics and all the different aspects that you've been building to try and get it, up and running. Recently, I've been seeing you post online, stuff to do with Zifa, so the Go Warriors, So again, it always amazes me how you're able to pivot, around, from all of the things that you've been doing. Why football? Where is this coming from?
So sometimes there are small things that define a project. And sometimes you find them along the way. And so one of the main things that you see in villages is you either see huts or you see a football ground. And it really came from listening to the Secretary General, the President of FIFA, saying something to the effect that it wasn't the academies that are properly made with all the facilities that were bringing about bigger stars in Africa. It's the dusty rural places. You were getting people like Sadio Mane coming from the village straight, going to the Premier League as an example. And so for me, I was like, rural development has been left behind in sport in such a huge way. Like nobody is thinking about the academy process within the village. And so in the village, the kids, they go to herd cattle. They play some soccer. They go to get water. They play some more soccer. They go to the field. They keep playing soccer. They come home. They play soccer. The sun sets, and then they wait until the morning and they play soccer.
Again.
And you start thinking about the Kenyans in terms of the running, and why they're so prolific. It's because that's a part of their day-to-day thing. But nobody has harnessed it and looked at it, from that perspective. And so our thought process from a Zifa perspective was to say, hey guys, have we really considered what we're doing about soccer from a tourism perspective? So sometimes it's not important to put the agenda at the forefront. You can try and solve it in a different way so that all interested parties get in, So you say sports tourism, outreach programs, and so on, because that solves the problem that Zifa needs to solve. The outreach, how do we start unearthing new talent? But for me, I'm like, that's how I can get people to start going to the village. What if we can go braai meat while we're watching a money game happening? Because the money game is the sports betting at village level. To say put this team against this team. It doesn't cost much for those teams to play against each other. For us to come and watch, have a beer while the village is watching. But at the same time, what if we put a giant screen? We now have Starlink. We can stream the matches. We can get accessibility of some of these technologies to be able to deliver and watch. It falls right into the rural tourism space. It's almost like it's not even a pivot in the sense of the word. It's almost like an important feature of the software. Because our software of rural BNB is to say, how can our software work? It's like a Microsoft Word will then add a new paragraph feature. a new font.
Yeah.
So the software is not really changing. What it's able to do is what's changed. So when a technology like AI comes, it gets integrated.
Updates.
That's what we're very good at doing, is integrating, looking at something and saying, oh, okay, this integrates very well into the rural tourism space.
Right.
And there are other things that we've been looking at lately, like the AI, the robotics, and so on. This all integrates.
Right.
And that's how I'm able to identify these things and be able to put them. But I also make it that I don't put myself as an operator.
Okay.
I become the think tank. And what I try to do is I try to offload this knowledge onto as many people as possible so that they can execute it in such a way that it also brings us commercial value.
Yeah.
And so the Ziffer thing allows us to be able to do, this is what I love about technology. FIFA at the World Cup did these fan parks.
Yeah.
And these fan parks were outside the stadiums, they were at restaurants, but none in the village.
None.
And that's what innovation truly is, where sometimes you look at a product and say, but what if I put it here?
Yeah.
What if I put chocolate into milk?
You might get something amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that is where me being a chef really comes in.
Okay.
Where I love to look at these components as ingredients. And I say, has anyone considered this lounge setup or this podcast setup in the village? What would a podcast in a village hut look like?
That would be quite interesting.
It would be so amazing.
Yeah.
It would be so amazing to just be in a rural hut and take some amazing people into that particular space.
Yeah, I mean, just have a go telling us how, like, the paintings in the kitchen, how she did it.
Absolutely.
How she cooks her food on the fire. As a podcast.
Yeah. And it changes the game completely.
Right.
I mean, I can almost imagine an Oprah Winfrey really wanting to be on the podcast.
Yeah.
Because have you ever been on that African podcast? You know the one they do in the hut?
Right.
Because remember, every podcast is described like that.
Exactly.
Remember the podcast where they do it in a...
Exactly.
Where they do it in a tree?
The setting is everything.
The setting is everything.
Yeah.
And so that's the beauty, where we looked at rural B&B as an innovation company.
Right.
That is there to offer solutions that come from a rural perspective, but can be implemented in everyday setting.
Right.
Our architecture can be used in cities.
Right.
Our systems with water can be utilized by city councils.
Right.
Our recycling, our waterless toilets, all of those things are our projection of what the future of living is going to be like.
Yeah.
And so what people see as pivot
Right.
is really just us upgrading our software.
Okay.
Because every year we're like, what does our iPhone look like? We are maybe at our 10th iteration of this business. And so with each uptake, we're getting, our rural B&B version 1.
Yeah.
It had like a few people. Then it went into the thousands of people, right? Now we're at our 10th iteration.
Yeah.
And now we've got millions of people who are following
Right.
the platform.
Yeah.
But now we're going to start seeing some real world implications and changes of how people are doing things. Like right now, our iteration, government ministries and so on are taking that on as consultancy. And so we're doing a lot of consultancy with governments.
Okay.
And so the next iteration, maybe it might be the president who's utilizing that to implement a rural strategy.
Yeah.
So we look at it as a single product with so many different features. And so what you see us doing is merely just adding to the features to say, now we've got a set of earphones, earbuds,
right.
and we've now added a new USB-C connector.
Okay.
We haven't changed our product,
but it's still
its objective is the same, but it's executing it in a very different way.
Okay. So one thing that really struck me as you've been narrating your journey, like all the different areas that you've been dabbling in, I'm seeing that the issue of storytelling is quite key in everything that you've done, whether it was your cooking, the B&B, the bus conversion, Camp Feel Good, all of that. How important is storytelling to you, and how important should storytelling be to other creatives as they try and build their brands, build their stories, build whatever it is that they're trying to build?
Yeah, so storytelling is probably the key thing. Yeah. It's the thing, there's nothing else.
Right.
So when you wake up in the morning, you are a broadcaster.
Right.
You're like a TV station.
Yeah.
My question is, what's your editorial policy?
Okay.
Who are you communicating to? And what's your message for the day?
Okay.
What are you broadcasting? So if you're like ZBC, there are people having meetings for what's happening daily.
Right.
So think about it as a creative. unless you know that, you won't be able to understand the pivots, so to speak.
Right.
You won't know when to do certain things because you don't have an editorial policy. So if you have an editorial policy about what story you want to tell, so see yourself as a broadcaster, as a magazine. See your Facebook profile as a magazine.
Right.
Page 1 is the first post on your profile.
Yeah.
So like when I'm making a business call, I make a business call, especially like even if it's a missed call.
Right.
People don't even understand the implications of a missed call. So you call a person, they don't answer their phone.
Right.
What they usually do is that they go look you up.
Okay.
On your profile. What's he up to? Why does he want to call me?
Okay.
I've usually posted something to do with that, so that they are primed.
Right.
There are certain clients I've been working on for 10 years. Just speaking their language slowly,
Right.
trying to get them on board,
Right.
trying to get that minister to understand where I'm thinking,
Okay.
so that I'm in the room at the table when they're discussing certain things.
Okay.
So storytelling is important to set the tone, to tell people like there's an expression I use, like good things come to those who wait. Now everyone will say, yeah, I've heard that before. It's not you who came up with it.
Right.
But I like to tell people where I'll be waiting.
Okay.
So I don't just sit there.
But you're waiting somewhere.
I'm waiting somewhere and I'm telling you where I'm waiting, so that the day you need me, you know where to find me.
Right.
Right? So storytelling becomes a very important tool of doing that.
Okay.
It's my propaganda. It's my way of getting you to understand what my thinking is. So when I'm doing comedy, I then don't write a joke that's just ha funny.
Right.
It's weaving into everything. This is why you hear me say stuff like, for example, my name is Carl Joshua Ncube and I'm the biggest Zimbabwean stand-up comedian in the world.
Right.
Now, people just think it's just a sentence. Carl Joshua Ncube, the biggest Zimbabwean stand-up comedian in the world. That's my intro. It's been my intro for years.
Right.
Carl Joshua Ncube. These are keywords on Google. Carl Joshua Ncube, biggest, keyword. Stand-up comedian, keyword. In the world, keyword. So if you type that on Google, you are likely to find me.
Okay.
If you say it enough times, Google will now understand that when the word comedian is being used, your face should be shown.
Okay.
And so I'm very deliberate. So I'm very deliberate, and I've now honed it in, like, from a storytelling perspective, to know that even my own personal relationships are a story, because I looked, every autobiography has stories about friendships. So I focus on my friendships.
Right.
My friendships are part of my narrative. They are part of my story.
Right.
The people that I interact with, they're all part of my story.
Okay.
Speaking on a podcast is part of my story.
Right.
So I've tended to think more about story first before anything.
Okay.
To make sure every day I am telling a story. My narrative keeps going out and I'm telling you what I do, not waiting for someone to ask me a question.
Right.
I will direct the flow of where everything is going. Because now, when we're now starting to activate the work, I don't have to pitch. Everyone will understand where my heart is. Everyone will know that, okay, he works with his wife. He's trying to seek an identity because he's half this, half that.
Right.
So when the government is thinking of nation building, I'm the first person they think of, because they'll say, oh, he's half Ndebele, half Shona.
Yeah.
These
So
are the
you
kind
can
of voices
bridge
that
the
we
gap.
need.
Exactly.
These are the kind of things that you end up fitting. You tell your story enough like a magazine. Again, not every page in a magazine is the same.
Exactly.
It's talking about different things. There are features, there are articles there are contributions, there are letters to the editor, there are specialist articles, there are columns, there's so many different things.
Right.
We have that much variety in us, right? So that's what we are, but during the day we don't use it.
Yeah.
Someone asks you how you're doing, you don't answer them from a story perspective.
Yeah. I've noticed Trevor Noah does the same thing. He's quite big on his whole half Swiss, half Xhosa,
Right.
all of that. But looking at you in the next 5-10 years, what's your story?
Yeah, so my story is that with each level of elevation, the main thing is about influence. So what God showed me is that I want you to focus on the influence. Like, he made me draw a circle. I was standing in the circle. Maybe draw a circle and says this is your influence.
Yeah.
And how you grow your influence is by focusing on where you are.
Right.
That circle keeps getting bigger.
Yeah.
So the bigger the circle, you start noticing, you start entering different realms of influence.
Okay.
So I had influence over my clients. I had influence over my colleagues. Influence over It could be, let's say, certain government officials.
Okay.
Influence of ministers.
Right.
Now I'm growing into influence in terms of countries. The main thing is that we now need to start putting our platforms to be able to influence industries, to be able to drive them by saying, listen, why are architects refusing to build things that exemplify who we are?
Right.
Why are the chefs not cooking food that exemplifies who we are? Why are the designers not designing things that exemplify who we are?
Right.
If you notice, there's a common thread, and the solution is just exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's just to talk about who we are.
Right.
And so when we're defining that, you're going to start seeing a lot more people define themselves according to this Afrofuturism. You're going to start seeing a lot of that starting to trend.
Yeah.
You're going to start seeing a lot of people starting to, and you ask yourself the question, where did it come from?
Right.
We definitely engineered this story.
Okay.
Zimbabweans no longer look at having a strong rural background as being a bad thing.
Right.
We're now starting to change the attitudes. People are going to start thinking rural first before they start thinking about the city.
Yeah.
And even where the way the world is going anyway.
Yeah.
You know, COVID hit us.
Yeah.
Right now, Donald Trump has pulled out funding.
Yeah.
We're now having to look internally at ourselves and say, and the solution comes back to the same thing as rural. You're sitting on the rural land.
Exactly.
You're sitting on the rural innovation. You're sitting on. So in the next 5 years, you're going to see me grow a lot more in influence, but you're going to now start understanding what I was doing in the past. The story, what you looked at as a variety of things,
right.
A lot of people are going to come to the consciousness of saying, oh, it was exactly the same thing.
And
I see what this guy was doing, right?
Exactly.
He's been using the same laptop and the same phone.
Right. It's just been upgrading software.
Yeah, it's just upgrading the software. Yeah, and the objective is now beginning to make sense.
Okay.
When I was doing comedy, I was planting the ideas. That's why I had the joke about Jamie Oliver and cooking ingredients you can't find in Zimbabwe.
Right.
Or talking about how in tourism in Zimbabwe, why do we have billboards that talk about AIDS kills or get circumcised? Why are our songs talking about gender-based violence? Beyonce is not singing a song about gender-based violence.
No, she's not.
She's influential in that space, but she's not singing songs about it.
Right.
And so we must stop this whole thing of pandering, because what we're doing is we're trying to seek money,
right,
rather than create value.
Right.
And you create value by creating good art, good storytelling, and then it will attract the money that you actually need.
Exactly. Yeah. Nice. Okay, so I know it's a cliche question. What advice would you give young creatives coming up? Probably in how they approach things, how they think, and going forward.
Yeah. So it's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
We say it all the time. Our parents say it to us. We never believe it when we're young.
Yeah.
Your struggle is part of your story.
Right.
Don't skip it.
Okay.
Don't ever skip the struggle.
Right.
Without a struggle, you have no chapters to a book.
Okay.
There's no book that starts with he had $1 million. The end. Your struggle, don't skip it. It's probably the most important defining thing.
Right.
And so when I talk to young people, I'm like, I want you to look at your circle.
Okay.
Stop looking above your circle at the success cases. So stop looking for mentorship from the people you think are successful.
Right.
Look amongst yourselves. Be mentored by the people in your circle who are making it.
Okay.
Learn from them, because their solutions are what you need now.
Yeah.
You can't use my solution. My solution, if you ask me, so how are you penetrating the Zambian market?
Right.
If you're a new artist, you want to penetrate the Zambian market, right?
Yeah.
Are you willing to do what I am willing to do, to invest in moving into another country?
Right.
That's not your issue. You're a student in university.
Yeah.
Start by struggling to articulate your ideas to the vice chancellor to get funding to do the projects while you're in university. Exactly. I'm literally tired sometimes of watching kids in high school saying, when I finish school. Who says school needs to be finished?
Start now.
Start now.
Yeah.
Start the magazine now. Start the dream now.
Exactly.
Because right now, nobody cares about you.
Right.
Nobody cares what you're doing. And that's probably the best thing, because once they now start seeing you coming, trust me, you don't want to be me. Right now, their offices, when they see me, everyone clenches themselves, because they're like, you know what? Carl is about to bring some disruption here.
Yeah.
And it could disrupt some jobs.
And
it will put people in uncomfortable spaces.
Yeah.
So people have a genuine fear of me now.
Right.
I miss that. I missed not being that guy.
Right.
Where people didn't see me coming, and the innovation would just smack them at the back of the head, and they'd be like, what happened? And then by the time I've run 100 meters, they can't catch me.
Right.
Now they see me a mile away.
Okay.
And so when you're young, when you're new, do not ever skip the struggle.
Right.
The struggle is your most important asset. The people ignoring your calls, not answering your calls, you not having money, you struggling, your parents telling you you're not doing any good, your wife leaving you, the girls not wanting you, all of those things happen. Go read the biographies. Those stories are there.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
a lot of guys are
new,
on their second, third marriages. I'm not saying that marriages are not going to work out, but sometimes it's a casualty.
Yeah. It
Marriage is a casualty of your dreams sometimes. And
Yeah.
so you might end up getting it right on the second, third time.
Definitely.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
We were watching the Quincy Jones
The
story.
documentary,
Like how
yeah.
many wives came in that equation?
But look how successful.
Yeah. So don't lean too much in some of those things
Yeah.
to be your security. You will lose everything. You
Yeah.
lose friends, family members. You lose people
Right.
for that particular dream.
Wow.
So don't skip the struggle.
Wow.
It's very necessary.
Oh, thank you so much, Carl. That is amazing stuff. Maybe where can people find you? What are you up to? What are your socials?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we're doing right now, we're in an exciting time where we're setting up our platforms, subscription. I'm really enjoying the subscription model.
Okay.
Of being able to deploy knowledge,
Right.
but on a subscription basis.
Okay.
So I operate right now online free. Then you can do consultations via WhatsApp.
Right.
And then I have the websites where you can pay for the same knowledge. So you'll see me existing in the rural B&B space.
Right.
The rural B&B space in the cities becomes the real estate space. So the Zim 365 real estate.
Right.
The travel and the tourism that is allowing us to be able to get to the villages is the Zim 365 travel.
Okay.
Because all the hotels will give us a place to stay to do marketing for them.
Okay.
But in exchange, we get to go see the villages that are nearby.
All right.
So that's what allows us to be mobile.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing. And then we have the CGN Academy that we have put online basically for people to learn.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm putting a lot of my lectures online. People can access them. I've now become a little bit strict. When I offer my knowledge, I usually offer it free of charge in the beginning.
Okay.
Let's say if I'm doing a workshop in about a month,
Right.
I'll offer free registration.
Okay.
Then the next week I'll offer discounted registration. Then the next time I'll offer slightly more expensive but discounted.
Okay.
But if you come to me at the last minute, I'm going to charge you an arm and a leg. And I deserve to.
Yeah.
Because I
You
think
didn't take up the opportunity.
yeah, Zimbabweans are lazy. They come last minute. And
Right.
trying to get them out of that last minute mentality of
Yeah.
thinking it's good, the knowledge is going to be there.
Yeah.
They must also remember that it has a value.
Okay.
So those are the different platforms, as I mentioned, that you can get me on. They're on all socials. I'm trying to also just enjoy using all of the social
Right.
channels right now. You know, your TikToks, Instagram, or your WhatsApp, and just trying to see how to deploy content in that manner.
In that manner.
Yeah.
Nice. Any shout outs?
Shout out to the wife. Definitely, always have to send a shout out. But also shout out to the kids who are showing us like how to use TikTok.
Right.
Man, I mean, the stuff these kids are doing,
Yeah.
or the stuff they're doing with AI, is great. They just haven't found purpose for it.
Yeah.
But it's just such a beautiful thing to see those that are doing, and it's a small number of people.
Right.
And I often say to people, sometimes I don't. There's a comedian friend of mine who said, "Don't argue with people about opportunities."
True.
So there's always going to be a few of you in the space. So I'm just happy that there are enough of them, So I'd like to send a shout out to them, and also a big shout out to, now that I'm, delving into the football space, a lot of our big legends, living legends in soccer.
Yeah.
The Peter Ndlovus, the Benjani Marwarus, the Moses Chungas, and so on. They are the ones who also kind of helped us to be able to dream, to know that a Zimbabwean can be successful elsewhere.
Okay.
Some of those things translate very well to the younger kids in the village who don't know if you can make it from Zarabani to Manchester.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carl.
Cool.
Thank you for your time. I really
Awesome.
enjoyed this conversation, and I hope people have learned quite a bit.
Yeah.
And people will try and get in touch. And thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.
Awesome.